Brian Thornton, longtime friend, man, knowing each other since playing back in middle school against each other, man. Welcome to the podcast, Commissioner of the Western Athletic Conference. Welcome into the podcast, man. It's good to see you, brother.
Man, LO, it's good to be here, man. It's like you said, it's been a long time. I can remember playing at Douglas Community Center back in the day when we were in middle school and then all through high school. So it's been incredible to watch your journey and your progression, and obviously really enjoyable to be able to spend a little time with you today.
Already. Now, right now, you're the commissioner of the Western Athletic Conference, but we're going to take it back a little bit. Your time coming out of high school, coming out of Manual High School, you chose to go to Vanderbilt. You played at Vanderbilt. You played at Xavier. Talk about your experience at Vanderbilt, what it was like, and ultimately ending up at Xavier. Just talk on that background a little bit before we move forward.
Absolutely. Well, unlike you, I was not a highly recruited guy per se. I didn't have the opportunity to go to Louisville and be a student athlete there, despite going to Manual and being on Louisville's campus. And so I chose Vanderbilt. It was a great opportunity to play in the SEC, which as everybody knows is high level basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And then something that was always important to myself and to my parents specifically was the educational and academic component. And at the time, it felt like Vandy was the best of both worlds. A top flight academic institution, but also an opportunity to play against the best of the best every single day. So I chose Vandy. I loved Nashville. I loved the opportunity to play in the SEC and, see the world and travel and play in big time games. But ultimately made the decision to transfer to Xavier after my sophomore year. Certainly played quite a bit during my time at Vandy, but wanted a little bit of a different fit. Wanted an opportunity to play for a program that was maybe a little further along in their success curve.
Mm-hmm.
And Xavier was that institution. At the time, Xavier was, kind of Atlantic 10 powerhouse, going to the NCAA tournament year in and year out. Dave West just won the National Player of the Year. And, they just had some really good players, had some great history, great coaches. It was kind of like they were just churning those kind of things out. So having an opportunity to play there in a basketball-centric school where there was no football, where basketball was king, and being an hour and 15 minutes away from home didn't hurt as well.
Yeah. Matter of fact, Xavier beat us with Lionel Chalmers, Romain Sato. And I remember me and Romain Sato playing overseas, man. We had got into it because we started talking a little trash, and he was talking about that Louisville and Xavier game, man. We kind of exchanged a few elbows back and forth. But yeah, man, it's right up the road, man. A great school. And after playing in college, man, you decided to go play overseas for a bit, man. You played in Germany, played for Auckland Dragons, team I played against a few times. Talk about your experience playing, overseas and playing in Germany.
Sure. Well, leading into my senior year, I was having a really nice senior year. I certainly was not a surefire NBA player by any stretch of the imagination, but I had worked myself into being a first team all conference level player. Mm-hmm. And late in my senior year at Xavier, I actually broke my leg and broke my ankle, which kind of derailed some of those plans. I'd already been invited to Chicago pre-draft camp and all those things. I would have been a summer league guy. You will call it that, and you never know what can happen from that standpoint. Right. But after that happened, I looked at, do I continue to play? Was this a career-ending injury situation? But decided to rehab it, went through the process. Took me 6 months to get back on the court. And then I had an opportunity to go play professionally in Germany in their first division, which was a phenomenal opportunity. They took me sight unseen based on film and based on kind of my body of work. But what that allowed me to do is to kind of sow those oats. It allowed me the opportunity to be a professional and to kind of check that box. And I only did it for a year. My body did not have the ability to kind of keep it going long term. But I got an opportunity to go overseas, to live in a different culture, to grow up, to learn a lot. Larry, you can certainly attest to this. When you play, high level college basketball, you're catered to. And in this day and age, that's even becoming more and more the case than when we played. But when you go overseas, you are a professional. You're getting paid, and there are some perks that come along with that. A car and an apartment, maybe a driver, depending on where you're at. There's a lot of things that kind of go along with that. But you're also on your own.
Yeah.
I can remember getting paid, but washing my own practice in my
Yep.
apartment. And that was something that
Yep.
would have been unheard of in any level of Division I basketball. So
Hmm.
you learn a lot about yourself when you're kind of forced to grow up, and I definitely had that experience that I wouldn't take away.
Right, right. Well, man, I can sit here and tell you stories for days about some of the things overseas, but I can definitely attest to having to wash your own uniform. That was one of the first things that I had to do when I got overseas, along with taping your own ankles. But once you decided to hang them up, you came back, decided to get into coaching. Was coaching something that you always envisioned yourself doing?
It wasn't, it wasn't something that I'd always set out to be. Honestly, growing up, I was kind of the basketball nerd when all you guys were talking about going to the NBA and playing. I was the guy who was, watching the NBA draft, thinking about who I would want to pick. I
Right.
think I had the mentality early on to maybe be on the business side of it, and to maybe look at it from the position of being a general manager or a basketball operational guy versus being a coach. Probably because I was a late bloomer, and the NBA dream wasn't something that was kind of set in my mind early on. But I loved the game, and after having an opportunity to play overseas, and it was taken away from me, so to speak, because of injuries. I had to get away from it for a minute because I had a little bit of a bitter taste in my mouth. But after spending a little time away from basketball and working corporately, I really started to miss it. And I felt like at that point in time, basketball had given me so much, and I thought it was my job and my responsibility to figure out how to give something back to the game. And coaching young men was something that I felt like I had an ability to do. I thought that I might be able to connect and resonate with some of them, and so I got into it and ended up coaching for about 10 years.
Now you went back to Xavier. You start out with Xavier as a GA. After Xavier, you went to Ball State.
I actually bounced around quite a bit
Uh-huh.
early on. I went back to Xavier, was a GA for a minute to finish my MBA.
Hmm.
Then that's when I worked corporately. And then I actually had an opportunity to go back to Xavier and spend 2 years as a full-time position as the director of basketball operations
Okay.
under Chris Mack when he became the head coach when Sean Miller left to go to Arizona.
Hmm.
So I spent 2 years there, got my feet wet in coaching, figured out that it was something I wanted to try to make a career of, at least for the time being. And we had some success, went to a couple Sweet 16s and whatnot at Xavier under Chris Mack. And then I spent some time at Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina, as well as Winthrop University in Rock Hill, South Carolina. So kind of lived in that Charlotte area. And then from there went to Ball State and spent 4 years there.
Now, once you left Ball State, you decided to go take a job with the NCAA. Now, being a former student athlete and in public perception, everybody always says like the NCAA is sort of like the nemesis of the student athlete because the student athlete is always getting used and, everybody's on the receiving end of everything but the student athlete. But once you went to work for the NCAA, did your view change or how was that since you were on the other side of the NCAA and not being a student athlete?
Yeah, I think it did change a little bit. First of all, my college experience maybe was different than a lot of others. One, I didn't feel like I had been used. Quite honestly, I felt like I was pretty blessed, because I
Mhm.
didn't grow up in a situation where I knew for sure I was going to get to go to college or that my college would be paid for. But I was fortunate that, I walked away from college with, a degree from Xavier. I had an MBA and I had zero debt and
Right,
an
right,
opportunity.
right,
And I
right,
had,
right.
lifelong friends. I had relationships. I had, the social capital that you gain on a college campus, especially if you're a student athlete, that you can kind of build the networking ability. So I felt like I won. I didn't
Right,
feel like
right.
I had been used. I do understand the narrative that is out there that, student athletes are being taken advantage of. But also, I think another thing that I learned at the NCAA is that, how many people are we talking about? The NCAA covers a lot of ground. I think that there's always a highlight on, the 5%, the men's basketball players, the football players who are, high level, that there are programs that are making a ton of money. but they're not thinking about, the soccer players, the tennis players, the volleyball people that
Right.
are there maybe for a different reason. And their experience is certainly different than the highest level of basketball. Obviously, you played at Louisville, and, being a basketball player at Louisville is like being in the NBA when things are rocking and rolling. But for the majority of Division I basketball players, it's not the same experience. And, so I think that's one thing that I really learned at the NCAA is it goes beyond kind of the narrative that you hear maybe from a public perception standpoint.
Hmm.
And I think the other part that I learned is who is making the decisions. I think that that's always kind of the misnomer that people don't necessarily understand is that most decisions are made at the institutional level. That the NCAA is kind of just the vehicle through which the decisions are made, but there's nobody sitting in the NCAA national office that's saying this is how things have to be. Everything is ultimately voted on by the presidents of the university, and that's how rules are actually made.
Nice. Now, when you worked at the NCAA, what was your actual job? What were you doing working with the NCAA?
Yeah, so I was an assistant director for basketball development, and so my role was a little bit unique because, to your point about the NCAA, when I came to the NCAA, I had just come from being a Division I basketball coach for the last 10 years, and so
Mhm.
my experience was different, quite honestly, than the majority of those who are working at the NCAA. If there is a big knock that you could probably hit the NCAA with, is that there's very few people who are currently there who have recent on-campus experience.
Yeah.
There's people there who are doing great work, and I have a lot of friends that are still there who do a fantastic job, but there could be a little bit of a disconnect between what the reality of what's taking place on campus and maybe what the building feels and sees. And so because I had spent 10 years, I could go in there and talk about this is how recruiting actually looks. This is how, when you transfer, this is how this actually feels. If someone were to cheat, this is how it would probably look.
Right, right,
So
right,
I was able to probably
right.
provide maybe a unique perspective. And I think that really helped. At least it helped. Hopefully, it helped the NCAA to a certain extent, but it certainly helped to get me involved in some conversations and to be around some people that were probably exceeded my pay grade at the time because I could provide, a service or some working knowledge that maybe a lot of people didn't have.
Nice. Well, I'm sure with your background, the experiences that you had in college, you brought a ton of information and ideas and possible concepts to the NCAA. So, with that opportunity, you had an opportunity. We had a chance to become assistant commissioner for Conference USA, I believe.
The American Athletic Conference.
American Athletic Conference. Excuse me. You had an opportunity to become an assistant commissioner of that conference. Talk about that transition and what that role changed for you to do.
Yeah, when I was at the NCAA, one of the great things that happened to me is I became a staff liaison to the men's basketball oversight committee, which
Mhm.
is kind of the NCAA committee that is tasked with making men's basketball decisions. The ways that men's basketball should get better, what they should focus on, and that's populated with some really smart people, commissioners, associate commissioners, people with basketball specific backgrounds. Dan Gavitt is very instrumental in that group, who's the vice president of basketball at the NCAA level. And I started to get to know some people who are in conference offices and on campus. Jeff Jackson, who was the associate commissioner for basketball at the Big 12, was a mentor of mine, has been a mentor for a long time. Gloria Navarez, who was at the West Coast Conference as their commissioner, who recently became the commissioner at the Mountain West Conference. Got to know her. Martin Jarman at UCLA, Judy McLeod at Conference USA, who's the commissioner there. So I got to know these people and started working with them and picking their brain and, sharing some maybe the thoughts that I had as well. And then over time, they told me, you know what, maybe you need to look at being in a conference office because it's a little bit of a hybrid between the micro of being on campus and focusing on one institution, one team, and the 100,000 foot level at the NCAA, where you don't get to touch and feel and have a connection with the student athletes or with the programs per se. And so trying to find that middle ground kind of became important. And I was given an opportunity kind of a little bit out of nowhere to go run men's and women's basketball for the American Athletic Conference, which was a great experience and a great opportunity that Mike Oresco provided me with. And it was crazy. The times were in the middle of COVID. So, jumping in after never being an administrator like that was, it was like dog years, quite honestly. My time there was, multiplied by 3 or 4 because, the amount of time that you had to spend with the ADs and the decisions that you had to make had severe impact. And so it was a great experience. The culmination of it was Houston, which was one of our programs with Kelvin Sampson at the helm, making it to the Final Four, which was, awesome for our conference. But, getting to work in the American really let me know that being in a conference office was where I needed to and wanted to be.
So 1 year of experience being assistant commissioner of a conference. Then you jump full-fledged into becoming the head commissioner of the Western Athletic Conference, which you are now. How was that going from assistant now to being the top commissioner, the commissioner of an entire conference? Was it much change in your role, or was it something obviously you were prepared for with the experiences that you had as the assistant? But how was that next step? Because sometimes it's different going from being that assistant to now you like fully in charge of making decisions, not just pitching ideas.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. It is different, and spending 10 years as an assistant basketball coach and hearing people make that transition. They talk about what's the hardest move as a coach is moving over 12 inches, when you go from being an assistant to the head coach. And that was something that I certainly experienced. There are certainly challenges of being a commissioner, but there's also opportunities as well. And I was certainly excited about the opportunity that was provided here at the Western Athletic Conference at the WAC to put some footprints down and to get my hands in on some of the changes that we wanted to make here. We have a great group of institutions. We have a very progressive group of presidents who are forward thinking and have a desire to be, one of the premier Division I conferences in the country. And they tasked me with trying to do some things different than kind of the traditional model. They wanted some creative ideas. And, that's probably one thing that I probably do fairly well is to come up with ideas. They don't all stick. Some of them, a lot of them don't work. And sometimes I'm sure my staff looks at the ideas I come up with and, we'll talk about them and we'll see if there's somewhere to go. But I'm sure sometimes they're like, nah, that's not going to work at all. And if it doesn't, we put that down and we try to come up with something else. So it's been a great experience, and we're having some good success so far, and we've gotten some traction in some ways that make it enjoyable. And I think we're doing pretty good work so far.
Now, one of your big ideas is flex scheduling, which I want to get to. But one thing I want to ask you beforehand is, obviously in the era now where schools are jumping conferences, it's completely out of whack. You see, like a school like Maryland and the Big Ten, and you see like UCLA and some of these other schools trying to go to the SEC. Obviously, mostly it's football related. I'll let you confirm or cancel that answer. But how do you, as the commissioner, and I know it's still early on for you, how do you try to control those things or attract schools to your conference? You try to build your conference up or keep the big schools in your conference?
Yeah, well, to start with where you started, a lot of those decisions are football predicated, and it's a money game. Quite honestly, a lot of it has to do with TV contracts and the amount of money that's out there at the highest level. When you're talking about Power 5, you're talking about Big Ten, SEC, places like that. If you look at what the Big Ten did under Kevin Warren, they signed an $8 billion TV contract. I mean, it's those are serious numbers. And then when you talk about how that trickle down works to those institutions, those institutions are receiving, 60, 70, 80 million dollars a year in a payout from that type of contract. So of course, schools that feel like they have the ability to maybe be a part of a league like that, where that's the return, they're obviously gonna explore that. Now, again, like we talked about with playing basketball at the Division I level, all Division I institutions and conferences are certainly not created equal. Right. They are not. And there's very few Big Tens and there's very few SECs. And then, the pecking order kind of trickles down from there. But, I think that from our standpoint, we've had some schools depart, and we've brought in some schools even in my time here in the last year. But I think we've had some addition by subtraction, and we brought in some good schools. But I think the only thing that you can do in this landscape is this to create a good environment, an environment where institutions feel like they have an opportunity to be successful, and kind of let the chips fall where they may. I think that that's all you can really do. You can't control what other leagues are doing. You can't control what institutions are doing, and people's reasons for decisions may or may not always make sense to you. So just create the best possible situation for your institutions. And I think that the ones that need to be in your league will recognize that. And as you have a certain level of success, then that could attract others who see what you're doing and kind of look around the corner and say they have something special brewing over there. Maybe that's something I want to be a part of.
Nice. Now, lastly, before I let you get out here, you have an idea on the table. It's waiting to be approved. It's been approved by majority of the conference. You still have in schools. You still have a little bit left before it's approved. Flex scheduling, the idea of maybe bubble teams and teams that are maybe last into the NCAA tournament, possibly playing some games like a free type schedule. Toward the end, I'll let you explain it, but talk about the flex scheduling idea that you're proposing for the NCAA coming up.
Yeah. One of the things that we've tried to do here at the WAC is, basketball is a huge part of, the front porch of your institutions, our institutions. March Madness is, where dreams are made, so to speak. And finding ways to enhance our ability to be successful in the NCAA tournament is something that's extremely important. It gives recognition and notability to our institutions and our conference as well. And so any ways that we can potentially move the needle is very important. As having an opportunity to win a game, win 2 games, get to the Sweet 16 is huge. But whenever conferences, especially at the mid-major level, have an opportunity to get great seeding or even the potential of getting a second bid into the NCAA tournament, is worth its weight in gold. And so, there's been a couple ideas that we've kind of tried to pioneer here at the WAC, and one of them was a concept that we called the Wild Card Week, which that we really worked through. We thought we had a concept that would work really well. And, some of the basis of it was creating a merit-based scheduling situation that allowed premier and quality mid-major programs to match up against each other in February in order to bolster their NCAA tournament resumes. You can almost think, kind of a new age version of the bracket buster from years gone by. But this was a little bit more creative. It was based on current net data. So we were going to match up the best teams with the best teams around the country from a mid-major standpoint and create the matchups that might allow them to be more successful. That's an opportunity that is kind of on the shelf for now. We had probably 8 to 10 conferences that wanted to be a part of it, but in order for it to really maximize its success level, we need more. We would need probably close to 15 to 20 conferences in order to get maximum value for it. So it's something we'll continue to explore, and we'll look at if that's something we can do in the future. The other thing that we've done is we're the first conference in NCAA history that I know of that is utilizing some analytics in order to seed our conference tournament. Traditionally, it's always been, what's your conference record determines your seed for the conference tournament, but the NCAA does not seed based only on how you play in conference. And so our mindset was, how do we create the environment to position the teams that have the best NCAA resume? How do we tier them in our conference? And we're essentially seeding our tournament based on NCAA resumes so that, if our best team wins, then we're going to have our highest rated team as our representative in the NCAA tournament, which the trickle down in theory is that that gives us an opportunity to get a better seed. Better seed means better opportunity to potentially win a game. And
Right.
you know what that means in the NCAA tournament.
Brian Thornton, appreciate you taking a little bit of time, man, to come through and bless us on the podcast. Always good to catch up with you, man. Tell the family I said hello, and congratulations on all your success so far, man. And I wish you nothing but the best for future endeavors, man.
I appreciate it, LO. Always a pleasure. Look forward to seeing you and hopefully getting our boys on the courts together sometime like we did.
You already know it, man. Catch up with you in a minute. I appreciate it.
All right, man. Be good.
Later.